So, hello, and welcome back. It's Aarnimetsa and Neo back with some 9max sit and go public-private coaching on pokerimania.com. So, now we are going to look at some of these tournaments through Replayer, and this is actually the last week of Neo's game, and I said, oh wow, when I looked at this graph quickly. But we'll see. Let's see what kind of an interesting games would we find here. I'm trying to take some of these games that have been going on for a bit longer. Like there's at least one win. Actually, wins are always nice. And I have my stack size filter from stack size between 10 to 30 big blinds. So let's go for it and start the replayer. And it's going to be my HUD, so it might be a bit harder for Neo to read, but let's see how it goes.
Okay.
This should be an easy fold, so I'm trying to get some of these hands through a bit quicker. So that we'll find something to talk about. What do you think about this situation?
This should be a fold, I guess.
Yeah, this should be an easy fold when opponent opens 3x. So, 7-6 suited on the button. Comes unopened to you.
Yeah.
What do you do?
I think I'll make a min-raise deal.
I think in 25-50 you can make it to 110, but min-raising ain't bad. Especially when your stack depth is already a bit depleted from the starting stack.
At that blood level I usually min-raise from late positions and I make it a bit higher from earlier positions.
But then the opponent calls, so we'll see some post-flop. What do our opponent do here? He checks. What do you do?
On a king-high flop, I think a c-bet is in order. I think a bit less than half pot I would make it.
With a flush draw, I think a half a pot c-bet would probably be quite good. But a bit less than half pot or half pot is going to be fine. 100 is okay. And we got the pot. What would you have done here if the opponent would have re-raised? This is, in a way, this is also a nasty situation to c-bet because you are a bit on the edge that if the opponent re-raises, can you go with this?
I mean, I have an open-ender, so I have some equity here, but to set stack size, I think I would have tended to fold this, but I'm not sure if that is correct. It also depends a bit on the size of his
if the
re-raise.
opponent raises small, I think that's going to be a good fold, and if the opponent something like shoves, then you have folded equity there. So it isn't as easy of a hand as it looks. Like this is one of those hands that you might have a reason for not to c-bet. Not to c-bet because you are having plenty of equity with your open-ender and you are having good cards on the turn. And also you'll pretty much know your equity if there is something like, let's say, an ace of hearts comes, then you know that you pretty much have only 6 outs, and even if you hit those 6 outs, you are not having a nutty hand.
But this is an interesting question here because of the c-bet. I mean, isn't it better to always c-bet this? Because if I get called, I have kind of a semi-bluff and can win big. But if I check, I have, with my open-ender, I have less than 50%, and I have no option or a harder time to win this pot immediately. And I also give him the chance to bluff the turn.
This is a bit of a nasty situation, because even if your opponent bluffs the turn, I think that you are having decent equity to call the opponent. So this is one of those spots that I actually think that this is a reason for not to c-bet as well. But as you said, that also as a semi-bluff it works if the opponent calls, but if the opponent raises, then you are folding equity on the board. And you are folding quite a lot of equity there.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an interesting hand still, and as you say, that even if your opponent bets the turn, then you are still having decent equity because you are having such a strong draw. So
but it's only an open-ender and I only get 1 card, so isn't the equity too little if he bluffs the turn?
it depends a bit on a run out, and I think we can imagine like a worst possible run out that you hit the straight would be something like a 9 and 10 of hearts, or Queen and Jack of hearts, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Or even something like 8 of hearts and Ace of hearts, or 8 of hearts and 9 of hearts, because you need to also get the straight. But I think out of the other runouts, you are still against the one opponent, you are still, because you are in position, so you can easier get value to your straight. And in sit and goes in general, there is an importance of pot control in these situations. Like, you want to, because ICM penalizes you for going to play for all of your chips, so it usually also penalizes you for raising the pot size a lot more. So there are good things in keeping the pot small, and also in sit and goes usually you are, like in here, you are with 22 big blinds. If you are hitting on the turn, you are having 2 streets to get most of your stack in anyway. So even building the pot isn't that important as it's in a cash game with 100 BB stacks.
Okay.
So that's also an answer for the Morse code, that the free card is okay to take here, and I think this is a really good question in this spot. And I'm a bit unsure in general. Would that be a better c-bet even against opponents that are pretty likely to fold or a check? I think right now I'm going to be back at the check club, and if this would be a rainbow board, I think then c-bet is more in order, because if the opponent raises, you can 3-bet shove on him and you are having really good equity. But in here, if he shoves or he raises and you 3-bet shove, he might be, or he will have a lot more that he will call your shove with, that you are not having that great equity against.
A question here is that if there are no draws on the board and I make a c-bet and he raises me, isn't his range then too value heavier? Because there shouldn't be draws in his range.
But even if the range is value heavy there, I think that in general there will be some bluffs when you have been stealing and betting. And even if they aren't bluffs, like when you are having an open-ender here, even if your opponent has something like, let's say, King 9 suited or something here, or King 10. So let's go for that. Let's say the opponent has something like King 10 here that he has decided to call pre-flop, and you are having the 7-6 suited of clubs, and the board is... I'm having a hard time to fit everything in that. If the board is like this, I still think that you are having, even though if your opponent is having the top pair, you are still having decent equity against it. And actually there would be, like, if there is no draws, then it's a bit better equity on you, because then there is no runner.
And this 34% is enough to shove on him.
I think it is, because you are, in general, you are also going to get folds, and this is pretty much, or like, this is not the worst case scenario. Worst case scenario would be a top set in this board, but even against this kind of hand that is going to be, I think in general, if we are building a range on the opponent here, which would take plenty more time, then I think that with something like 7-6 suited in this situation without even a backdoor flush draw, you are getting more than 40%.
Okay.
And that's going to be enough in general, I think. So like, that's even if your opponent is having a good hand there, you are still having equity, and you are still having a lot of equity on the board against him, and the opponent will also fold, so you are having fold equity.
Okay.
Let's go and see the next interesting hand. Well, this had potential, but nope. What do you do here? Razor and a caller, and you are stuck with tens on small blind.
I'm thinking about a shove, but I would really check the stats of this UTG razor here. I need a second for that, sorry.
I think that I probably couldn't find anyone on my database that I would fold tens in this spot.
There are people who... I have seen people who raise literally from those positions 2% of their hands. It's terrible. But if he's not that one, then I would shove here. Yeah.
I think that this is going to be something that this is generally going to be a really good shove if you don't have an opponent that has been shoving, like, has been playing 200 hands from early position and playing only 2% of hands. That's something that's really, really tight. That's like only jacks plus or something. Not even ace king suited. Or not even ace king. That's going to be weird, but that also tells you that there will be money in the micros. And let's try to find out. It's going to be a bit more interesting. What do you think about this hand here?
He's in cutoff, and his dot.
And he has raised the previous hand against you.
Yeah, but his cutoff steal percentage is pretty low. Also, I'm not sure about the sample size here, but
18 hands in total.
not that much. Well, I mean, most of the time I would fold this. I'm not sure if this is good enough for a 3-bet. And post-flop, it has not much playability.
What do you think about in here? What kind of range would the opponent need to raise? Let's say that he's folding about half of his raising range. What kind of range he would need to raise here for it to be profitable for you to shove an a6 off? It doesn't need to be perfect.
Well, I'm not sure.
So let's go to the Hold'em resources calculator then. Advanced hand. This is a full ring sit and go based from clipboard. We are having a 3-bet calculation. And then we'll wait. I now can't understand the hand that the Morse code asked about the call, because 2-9 high will call anyways if 600, because 400 only more. Now I don't completely understand, so perhaps you can open up it a bit more. This is actually an interesting situation. All in all, that even if opponent is opening 16% and calling only with 4.8, so folding like 70% of his range, you can't be shoving here with a6 off. So that's going to be something that's probably going to be best as a fold. Fold, and that's also something that you'll need to. And in here, if we are looking at the Hold'em resource calculator, then we can also, if we are looking at the Almidav's ranges, like if we are thinking that he's opening like he looks like to be opening, actually probably he might shove the smallest pocket pairs. If he's opening 25% ish range, and then we are doing our calculations again, still a6 off is going to be too bad of a hand. But I think this is something that is going to be valuable to look like what you can 3-bet here. And I think something like deuces or any pocket pair and ace-jack off, and something like suited from 9 up would be a pretty solid range to 3-bet and king-queen off. And in this a6 off, when Morse code is also said that could also call, yeah, calling is also an option to defend here. And it depends also on how much or how good you think you are in post-flop situations. And defending these by calling, and defending a lot of these by calling, might result in a lot of spooing before learning the limits. But there will be, even if the opponent will have something like the 25% range here, 20% to 25% range, there are a lot of better aces, so even if you are hitting an ace, you are not completely sure if your opponent carries on with a lot of aggression that you have still hit well. Something like ace 6 suited would have been better. Would have been actually a lot better to defend as a call.
Mm-hmm.
But ace 6 off is something that might result in spoos pretty often. So even though it's only 100 chips more, it's still going to be something that's not as nice to play. Jack 9 off. What should you do here? Unopened from the button.
Looks like another min raise steal for me.
Yeah, that's what it should be. Then the opponent calls. Bets big. What do you do?
I fold.
Great
I mean,
option.
I have no showdown value. I don't have much equity here. So, I mean, it could be a bluff, but I can't do much. His nothing is probably a bit better than my nothing, so...
Yeah. But something like ace high would probably be here a hand that would need to be called, because it's so unlikely that this opponent will have anything, especially as he looks to be aggressive by his pre-flop stats, and usually those guys are also a bit more aggressive on the post-flop side as well.
Maybe he has a pocket pair and wants to protect it, or something like that. Or maybe he thinks I missed the flop completely and bluffs because of that.
There are like options that the opponent... I think that the opponent's range that he bets here is mainly bluffs, but the large sizing is a bit worrying for me.
Mm-hmm.
But the more aggressive the people are in general in those spots are, that I'm going to start calling wider, even though I don't have any like post-flop stats on the opponents, or not that much post-flop stats. But I'm trying to infer from his pre-flop stats also that does he play aggressively in general or not.
Mm-hmm.
Queen 10.
Well, it would be another min raise steal. Also, I may be a bit discouraged now because of this guy in the big blind. Maybe I'm thinking he's maybe a bit too wild and aggressive. But I think Queen 10 off is a good enough hand to do it again. I could also think about maybe shoving this if I think that the blinds are too aggressive or playing too much back at me. So this would be another option if I think they will call me and be aggressive post-flop.
Yeah. I think that this would be probably... I think that this could be probably at the edge of Nash without antes, or it will be like... It's going to be a Nash hand, but it's not going to be wildly profitable, so I think that it's going to be better to be played as a min raise.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a mistake to fold in general. Even though this guy looks to be a bit aggressive, but you can't know from just one hand.
Okay.
Ace 6 suited.
Well, should be another min raise.
This is actually something that could also be a shove as well as...
Yeah, because of the big blind is a bit short.
Big blind is a bit short. You are not that deep yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like in general, like you are the deepest with 4, or this is like effectively next deepest is 13.8, and A6 suited is generally a hand that you don't like the flops that often. And there are two guys that are having 10 big blindish stacks, so
Mm-hmm.
that would be quite close between min raising and shoving. Probably pocket force is probably not a good enough shove when there are no antis and the biggest stack is in the big blind.
Yep.
Played to perfection. Ace-8 suited.
It's not a fold. It could be a min raise. I mean, if I think he's really tight, I would min raise and fold this. And if I think he's a bit more active, I think I would shove it.
I think this is one of those hands that with ace-8 suited it's going to be a shove most of the time, even if opponent is really tight. Like these ace and a small card hands and like small pocket pairs are going to be hands that are going to play better as shoves, especially when the stack size is this low, the 8.7.
Okay.
That I think that if you are raise folding ace-8 suited, then you are in generally folding a lot of equity. The opponent needs to be really tight. That's actually interesting as well. What do you think about this?
About what?
This is ace-8 off. One limper.
Oh, okay.
200.
Well, I mean, I could be shoving this, but the problem is that the limper has me covered, and I'm also not so sure what his limping range is, or how he reacts in general, if he's someone who can fold in those spots and doesn't call with just some crap. So I think I would tend to fold here unless I have better information on his limping range.
What would you shove here in general?
I would say, I mean, I'm the second biggest stack, so that makes my range, should make my shoving range here pretty tight. I would say pocket 8, ace 10 suited, ace jack off. Maybe it's a bit too tight, but I'm the second biggest stack. I have a good chance here to get into the money without risking it with a shove here.
I was actually thinking about 6s plus and ace 10 suited and ace jack off, so we are not far away. And something like king queen suited can also be debated, but we are actually really close with each other on that. So, and that's also because of the reasons that this is the biggest stack. And one of the reasons that would make a shove a better play in here is that the opponent both limps and raises. Like an opponent that is something like 15/13 that limps UTG, I wouldn't be touching that with a long pole. Or something like if the guy is 22/0, when there's no raising range, the opponent can be then limping also something like aces, pocket tens, everything that would seem stupid to limp and call, but there are people that do that. But when the opponent is something like, let's say 30/15 or 22/9, that he's limping like half of his range, raising the half of his range, usually with those guys the limps are going to be pretty weak.
A question about this hand is, we are here second in chips. If you would be one of the other stacks who is third or fourth, would you then shove with a wider range over him, like pocket fours or something like that?
Like if we are looking at here, like this walleye guy would be the guy that I would shove the widest on, because I would be closing the action, and then B, there would be the shortest stack. So I think that the walleye guy is having still fold equity against the limper, Because in general, limpers are going to fold too small. But this is also when you are not closing the action, you are everything but closing the action here. That there are three people behind you. So, and also with Almidav, I would be shoving quite wide because I think that he will have even better fold equity that there's only one guy behind him that can wake up with a good hand. That's actually going to be quite interesting to see what kind of hands do we uncover here. I don't think this is a bad shove. And I don't think this is a bad call, so...
Whoa.
And both of these guys played it well, but I think the worst guy wins, so that's always like, yay! Now there are easier chips on the table. So 7-6 off, I think you are folding this. Corrode limps. What do you think with Jack 6 off?
Well, I think it would be a good idea to play this aggressive and raise over him.
I actually almost said that this is like... that this is a hand that you don't have Jack shit, but you are having Jack 6. And I think that this is something that will play better as a check.
Ah, okay.
And you are having position post-flop, so...
Yeah,
this is like a hand that you don't want to... you don't want to invest anymore.
It depends also a bit on the flow of the game, or how often he does it and how he reacts to raises.
I think the problem in here is that you are having a lot more room for moves post-flop than pre-flop. Like if you are pre-flop, if you are raising this to 600 and the opponent calls, you are left with a pot and a half or something on the flop. So with right now it's going to be a pot of 400. If you are betting the flop, you are still left with 2200 chips. But if you are raising this to 600, the opponent calls, you are on the flop, and then you are pretty much having to make a decision on a pretty large amount of your chips.
Okay.
Or then you will be like second smallest stack if you lose that. So checking is, I think it's going to be good. What do you think?
I'm thinking fold here. I mean...
Oh, go on.
What? Okay. I think the problem is that it's a one-colored board, and it could be that he has a club here and won't give that up. I have second pair, so I have some equity, but I don't think it's enough to continue here. His bigger bet size looks a bit weak, but I think I would fold this. Yeah.
I think in general I would be pretty inclined to call at least one bet from an opponent, because this one bet can be a complete bluff. And I think that if an opponent has something like weak club, he will check the turn. And you are having plenty of showdown equity. So I would be probably calling at least one street, and then you'll know pretty much on the turn if another club comes and he bets, you'll know where you are. And I think when the opponent just limps here, he will have plenty of weaker hands and plenty of bluffs that he will do that as well. Limper strikes again. What do you do with 4-9?
I don't think it's a good hand to complete. It's not a good hand to raise, so that just is a fold.
Yep. Can we see what the opponent limps? No, he limp folds. What do you think about this?
King Queen off is a good hand, but here we have a really tight UTG raiser. He only raises 6% of his hands, and he's UTG, so I think I would just fold this. I could maybe call, but I'm not deep enough, and I could have the second best hand, so I would fold this.
I think in general, like, against pretty much all of the other opponents, this is pretty much a shove, but against this wall one guy, it's going to be a fold.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's only 40 hands on him. Yeah, what do you think about this here?
Well, he seems to like to limp a bit. I'm usually not sure what it means when someone limps from button or from cutoff. So I would again play this passively and just check. My hand is not very good.
I think this is going to be optimal, that when you are checking here, you are always getting some of your equity, and I think most of these guys that are limping, they want to see flops. They want to see some action, but if they don't hit their flops, I think quite a few of these guys will just then check fold their hands, so...
Mm-hmm.
And there might be that you might hit. What do you do now, even though you're... in your head you are already hearing the cashier saying ka-ching, ka-ching?
Well, I stay passive and check back in the hopes that he will try to take down the pot.
You can't check back when you are not in a position.
Whoops, sorry.
Yeah, just check.
So he checked to me.
No, he's in position, so he can check back, but...
Sorry. Yeah, then I will just check.
Yeah, and have him opportunity for bluff as well, because this is a flop that you should never hit. Opponent doesn't bluff, and opponent probably doesn't hit because you are hitting even better.
Mm-hmm. I think it doesn't make that much sense to bet here because he probably has nothing, but... And there's also... I have the complete nuts, there's nothing I can be afraid of, so I think it makes sense to check again in the hopes that he maybe makes a bet or that he maybe hits a river card. That there's maybe a high card or something. Yeah.
I think in here I would bet something like 250 or 300, because when this 8 comes, it opens a flush draw, so you can get value from flush draws. You can get value from overcards that don't believe you. You can get value for pretty much any pocket pairs. So I think in turn you need to bet, because if you just check, the pot will be 500 on the river. Even if he hits something, you are probably going to get only 1 street of value. If you are betting now, you can still get 2.
Okay.
Opponent bets. What do you do?
I think calling is the best. I think if I re-raise here to get more value, I may get him to fold too often.
Yeah, I think only pocket pairs and something like... Pocket pairs, any hands with a 6 or any hands with something like pocket 9s or better, or a flush draw will call here, so... Calling is okay, and if the opponent is having one of those better hands, you will get the money in the river. Except against the flush draw, that might get more money in here. But you are getting all of his stack if he has a flush draw and he hits it. So, the river comes.
Yeah, this looks pretty good. Now is the question, should I check back or should I make a bet here? I mean, if I make a bet here, it may look like a bluff and he may call, even with something a bit more crappy, like an ace high or something. On the other side, if I checks is he will probably check a lot of hands. So I think I would maybe make a bet here.
I'd say that the bet is in order. What's your bet sizing in here?
It could be a really small bet or a really big bet. So I'm not sure.
What are the merits of both? What is the merit of betting really small here? And what is really small?
Really small would be maybe a third of the pot, 300 chips. I think the merit is that he will oftentimes have to call this and maybe sometimes go over it. The merit of a big bet is that it looks weaker or more like a bluff, while he will fold more often. The times he calls, it will be a lot of value for me, and a big bet would be pretty close to pot size, maybe 800 or maybe even pot sized.
Yeah, I'm thinking about 700 to 800. That's probably my choice of bet sizing, and it's because this guy looks so passive, so it's pretty likely that you are getting more value out of this kind of really passive guy by betting yourself. And if he has a really good flush, you are getting money in any way. If you check here and he has something like a 9 high flush, you are not getting any. He can check it or like bet something small and stupid. And if you are betting small against the really strongest hands, you might get the money in well, but there are the medium strength hands that you are getting a lot more with the bigger bet.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about 700 to 800, so this 300 this isn't bad, but I think that the bit bigger is better when you are against a passive opponent. If you would be against someone like Almidav, then a small bet would be a lot better. And if he has something like a 9 or 7 high flush, then it's... Oh well, that's also something that you probably wouldn't get value if you would bet 700 or 800 here. But with 300 you are getting value from a pair of 7s. Really interesting hand in a way that you could have gotten value from flop on from this guy, and you might even have gotten it in on the flop if you would have bet, but it's pretty rare, and it's pretty rare in his range, and also should make you wonder a bit about if he limps pocket 7s pre-flop, that what else does he do? What else does he limp? Let's see, do we see? King Jack off. And not bluffing with it at any point of the hand. Queen 4 suited. On the button, one limper.
I mean, the problem is that the limper is pretty short, and I'm not sure how he reacts. I mean, if he's the guy who just limp folds a ton, I don't think we have that much limp fold situations with him.
And we have just seen pocket 7s and King Jack off.
Yeah, it's also a very value heavy range, so I would just fold.
Yeah. And something like, I think ace 4 suited, I could have shoved like any suited ace, any pocket pair. Just because the pot is so large, especially when the antes kicked in during this hand.
Okay.
Oh, this looks like a value hand. What's the play here?
I think I stay with min raise.
Yeah. You get a caller and you get bet. What do you do?
I think the best way of action here is to just call and to stay passive here. I mean, if I shove, I have seen people who are able to fold this, so I think it's best to just call.
It's best to just call. I agree. But I had to check that. What had you done here?
What have I done?
You'll see.
Oh,
And
crap.
You have raised this, and I think that there is like some value in this, but I think calling is way better, especially that you are in position. There isn't like any card that you are afraid of, that or any card that much like, and the opponent may just bet the rest of his stack in with like a flush draw on the turn that he wouldn't get in, or when he gets it in on the flop, he will get it in with a better equity than on the turn. But he gets it in with pocket sixes. Got to love the money in these micro sit and goes. And this is something that I presumed that there might be as a problem in your game, that you generally know what to do. And I think I have seen this from some previous coaching sessions or that we have had, that when asked later on, you would know what the optimal move would be, but you hadn't done it in games, so there might be something that even though you have studied and you know what the best move is, it might still be a bit of autopilot that takes over, or not having the time to think the situations through. And the medicine for that is to analyze a lot of your own hands and try to think about and use the hand analysis forums. And I know that there are like 4 or 5 hands that I still need to respond in there, but and that's something that I need to applaud you, because you have been doing a great job in improving there and improving your thought process. But it's also something that even when you improve your thought process so that you can get better in analyzing the hands yourself, it still takes a lot of work to take it to the war zone and be able to deliver in game, as well as that it isn't enough that you know what to do, you also have to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But when you know what it is and know how it is, then you can check for yourself, have you done it, and improve in the future. One hand bubble, that's luxury. So, Queen 9 off, what do you do?
Well, I would min-raise this. Min-raise fold.
I think this would be one of those hands that the equity is so good in this hand that I think that it might be better to shove this hand than min-raise fold. Especially if opponent is an aggressive 3-better.
Mm-hmm.
Because you are having so much equity. If you are min-raise folding, I think you are wasting some of it. But if you are shoving, it's going to be way plus EV to shove. But it's not strong enough to min-raise call, so
Okay.
you have shoved it.
Well,
And also the opponent also had like 11 big blinds, so he wasn't that deep stacked.
okay.
Tens. What do you do?
I think I mean, there are 2 options here. I could shove it, or I could play min-raise call.
What do you think is a better?
I mean, the problem is that he's not that aggressive. So, or I think he's not that aggressive. I think his stats were not. I mean, he wasn't 3-betting that much.
This was the 30/30 guy from earlier on, so
Yeah.
now it's just my stats have been.
I mean, I
Stats
think
have been reset, so I think that if you would have stats on him, I think he would be quite aggressive.
Mhm. I mean, against aggressive people, I think min-raise call would be better. And against people who are a bit more passive and who I, in the past, have shoved more into, I think it would be better to have this in my shoving range.
I think in general, or against most people, I would have the tens as a min-raise call range. And there are some opponents that are calling a ton, and then they are playing in position, and I have pocket tens. But usually even pocket tens, even if there is one overcard, it can be played pretty profitably. But shoving is not a mistake. That's
Okay.
the easy option. I think this Jack 10 off is something that would especially be in the min-raise range. I think this is a solid hand. You are having about 24 big blinds. And this Corrode is probably not a good player.
Mhm.
And I think even raise calling this Almidav isn't that bad. It might even be a raise fold. It's going to be close anyway. But I think that's going to be a well profitable button raise. And this should be an easy shove. If the opponent would have min-raised, this would have been an easy call to defend against this opponent. But when he shoves like 24 big blinds, then it's easy to.
Okay.
And Jack. This is the Jack shit off. What are you doing with it here?
I think if it would be Jack 7 off, I think this would be a clear shove for me. Jack 6 is, I think, a little bit below Nash. I mean, we are 3-handed. Here's 5 BP. I think I would fold this.
I think Jack 6 is at shoves with antes in, it's going to be like 7.5 big blinds. And I think in general you can be a bit more aggressive on small blinds. So I would be shoving Jack 6.
Mm-hmm.
Jack 6 in this situation. And that's like heads up Nash, but that's something that's going to be pretty close. And I think in this situation, even generally opponents need to be a bit tighter, but they still need to be pretty wide against the 6 big blind shove, and I don't think general opponents are wide enough.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what would you do with this tens?
Well, I could min-raise them or I could shove them. I think since I'm around 10 BP and we have a short stack and the big blind is maybe very call happy, so I think I would just shove it.
What about queens?
Queens I would min-raise.
I think tens are bit on an edge, and you are having like 14 big blinds, so it's like on the upper edge. Do I want to even shove tens, even when there is an active caller? But I think that it doesn't matter that much in here. If this both would be tight ABC regs, then this would be a min raise, clearly.
Mm-hmm.
So, about 15 big blinds, 16 big blinds, king jack off.
Well, I think this would be a possible spot, either to call and defend, or to just 3-bet shove, or to just shove.
I think both are fine, and when the corrode has been stealing against you such widely, I think re-raising might even be a bit better. But both are fine. I think that as long as you don't fold this, everything is fine.
I hope I didn't fold it.
Opponent bets.
The board is really dry. But he could have ace high or a pocket pair.
What happens with the dry boards? Like, if you are ahead of opponent's range pre-flop, do you think that if there will be a dry board, that are you more likely to still be ahead on a dry board, or?
Yeah, I think I'm more likely to be ahead. That's why I always get re-raised if I bet on such a board. So this would be a good spot, I guess, and to re-raise.
Actually, I think the calling would be a bit better, because then you will have at least 10 good cards in the deck. Like every jack, every king, every queen.
Mm-hmm.
And even nines are somewhat good. And if you think that, and with king jack off, I think that against an aggressive looking player that has been like, this is the third time he min raises or raises from the small blind, I think that with king jack off you are way ahead of his range, and when the board is so dry, it doesn't change that many equities. So like, if you are ahead of him pre-flop on a dry board, you should still be ahead of him. So, and it would be a completely different thing if this would be something like 5, 6, 7 and all would be like clubs.
Mm-hmm.
Because on those kind of boards, equities are turning around a lot. Like, the wetter the board, the more the equities change. And on the other hand, if this is like deuce, 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 then pretty much every hand is still the...
If the bot would be low cards and rainbow, but not too connected, and he bets what?
I think on a dry board I'm pretty apt to call him once, and if he checks on the turn, then I'm pretty apt to trying to steal it away. I think most opponents in the games are playing too much of a one-bet poker. Like, they are betting once on the flop, but if they don't get the pot with their bluff, they are pretty apt to give it up.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that depends so much on the player. Like, some players are playing shotgun poker, and there are always two shells in the shotgun, so they are always firing two barrels.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I think like there would be a lot of weapons analogies, that some people are playing cannon poker, that they are firing once but big, and some people are having assault rifles that they are just betting and can't stop. And but in general, I think that there will be too much of the one bullet and then away, especially. But this is like especially important to think like. And if you would have been behind here, you would have something like, let's say 8-9 suited of spades. Then this would be an easy fold. But with king jack off, I think that you are so much ahead of the opponent's range that you are having showdown equity on such a dry board.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are some spots that you might be able to defend better, and also in that situation shoving it pre-flop wouldn't have been bad. Pocket 8s. What is the...
I mean, we have to be pretty tight because there's a shorter stack on the table in this situation, but I think pocket 8s are good enough to just get it in here and shove it.
What about pocket 5s?
This would be maybe a bit more on the edge. It depends a bit how aggressive he is. I mean, how much he is opening from button. Steal from button. We don't have much hands on him, but I don't know. I think I would make the border at pocket 7s, maybe pocket 6s, something like that.
I think pocket 5s is going to be a good shove in here. I'm unsure that would like every pocket pair be a shove here against. I think just in case of this guy, I remember that we saw him limp a lot at the early game, and now he raises a lot. I think he's a loose player, and I think that, or even in the early game, he was a loose player but limps more, and now he's an aggressive player. And even though we are second largest stack, we don't have as much ICM implications as in the bubble. And this is also that when our stack is so large, the opponent should fold quite a lot of his hands if we shove. So then, and we got a call from Almida, which is pretty weird. But ace queen suited. I think he played it well. King 5 suited. Shouldn't this be a Nash shove?
From button. I think this is pretty close. It depends a bit on the kicker here. I think, and because we are second in chips, I think it could be pretty close. So if it's a shove, it's pretty thin, I would say.
It's a shove, and it's a pretty thin shove, so you'll get virtual cookie points.
Okay.
And now Deja will hate me. She'll always hate me if she's listening and I'm talking about cookie points and we don't have cookies at home. It's like such a newbie mistake on my part. But I think like my senses are in there that, yeah, a suited king. Now let's shove and let's make these aggro guys suffer. It's actually a weird game. Then I think I have your November hands, and still I didn't have any hands on these two guys, so I think that's slightly weird. This is an interesting exploitation, and if you're exploiting, this is also an option to exploit as limping, because the stack sizes are really, really thin. But I'd say that this looks pretty strong, this min raise. And if opponent is a guy that folds too much, that's going to be a good min raise even with the 9 deuce off. So there is 1,900 to call. You are having king jack suited. What do you think?
I think this would be a Nash call, but I'm not so sure what his range is for that. But I think it's too good a hand to not call. I think it's a call, I think.
I think so as well, that it's going to be such a good hand. I think like if we are looking at, we should look at Nash here, because I think that this is going to be way inside Nash, like it's going to be like a really good call, like plus 1%, it's a lot. Like if we are looking at this Almidav's like plot range versus hand equities, and let's look Neo's hand and King Jack suited, I think like if we are looking at it here, it's not horrible if opponent opens something like 10%. It's not horrible. And it's going to be profitable against most opponents, or really profitable. So this is a hand that I think really should be called, and it's really hard to fold that even against pretty much anyone. And you have called it. That's great. 8-7 suited, shouldn't that be a shove? And let me guess, this is a if it's a Nash shove, it's a close shove.
Yeah, I think it's close, but this could be a shove, I think.
Yeah, I think it is, and it's a close shove, but still. And that's something that we shouldn't actually discuss. But I think that there were like two hands that were decent suited hands, and I think most of the people that are having problems with shoving are having problems shoving with something like suited connected hands that are going to be really good hands to play. And this is not a call. We are running a bit over time, but it doesn't matter. We can go through this tournament. I don't know how many hands do we even have here. Like 10 or 20. And against an interesting opponent, I think. It was not a newbie mistake on me, because Deja started making pancakes. I think she predicted that I might be talking about wiki points. But that's also that if there is going to be pancake in the oven, I can't be going that far away with this. I think in here that if you are having 10 big blinds, this is like on the edge of Nash calls. I think that you, in general, if I don't have reached that my opponent is an aggressive player, I'm not going close to Nash calls. I would be calling something like King 7 or King 8 here.
But I thought we established that he's a bit on the loser side.
A bit on the loser side, but I don't think that he's going to be shoving Nash. So, because I think this is so on the edge that even if he's aggressive, he needs to be really close to Nash for it to be profitable to call. Really interesting to see that there are like, this is a never-ending small blind or never-ending big blind situation for you. And this shouldn't be a Nash call, so you haven't made it. Now it's your small blind. 5-4 off.
Well, it's not a Nash shove, so, and since we are in push or fold mode, and I mean, we could play this min raise.
Against what kind of player?
Against the players who are not that 3-bet happy or that aggressive, and who are also able to fold something post-flop.
In general, we should be playing this as a min raise against players that are folding their big blinds at least 50% of the time. I think even though it's reached now 73%, I think it's going to be a bit too bit too much for what the opponent generally will do, so fold is a good one. But cookie points for thinking about an option to also min raise or limp stab there.
Mm-hmm.
You are getting a lot of walks, but you shouldn't complain. A lot of walks and a lot of crappy hands. This is interesting. What should you do with the queen 4 off?
I don't think it's good enough for a Nash shove, so...
It's not going to be a Nash shove because this opponent has already limped, so you are on the big blind.
Yeah, but if I look at Nash for an orientation, I mean,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be a shove then, and now that he limps, it will be probably even worse, so I will just check.
I think in general, we do know that if an opponent limps that both limps and raises, his range will in general be quite weak. Like, in general, when the Nash charts are made, then the opponent, the big blind, is always having 100% range because he hasn't done anything that we can narrow his range down. But in this situation, this opponent has done something to narrow his range down, and then I think you can narrow the range down to be a bit weaker. And I think there is an opportunity to either check or shove, and I think they are really close together in this hand.
Mm-hmm.
Opponent checks the flop. I think your check on the flop is good. Then opponent checks the flop. What do you do on the turn?
I think because of the draws and the card constellation, I think I could bluff it here and make a bet. This should look dangerous to him, and if he establishes that his limping range is not that strong, this could be a bet here, I think.
I think also that when his limping range is not going to be that strong, you are also having showdown equity with your queen high. And I think when the card constellation is such that there are two different flush draws and there are a lot of opportunities for gotchas, I think that bluffing here is not going to make the opponent fold that often, even though it will look dangerous against an opponent with small cards, but you'll win small cards pretty much anyways.
Okay.
So check is good. If the opponent bets, I think you can call a small bet here with the queen high. And I'm probably starting to sound like a huge calling station. With kings, what to do?
I would min raise this, or I mean, I even could, I think, limp this as a trap.
And that's because there are no style points awarded in poker. If this opponent is a player that we want to play against, he's aggressive, then we should do anything to let him have an opportunity to play aggressively against us. So limping or min raising are good. Folding is the worst, and I think shoving is second worst.
Yeah. They're close together.
No, the folding and shoving aren't close together. Folding is quite close together with the min raise and limping against this kind of opponent.
Mm-hmm.
I think min raise is probably the best on average, and shoving is worse than that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is also what I said earlier. If you are explaining a hand how it should be played, you'll know how to play it. But then in game, it might be a bit different.
I think sometimes I'm just thinking a bit in the wrong direction. Maybe I thought that if I shove this, it looks less dangerous to him and he will call with more hands. Sometimes my thoughts go just a bit wrong, I think, or a bit too tricky.
I think against the reg that shoving might look a bit weaker. But if it's against a fishier player, I think that it's always better to have them have an opportunity to shove. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be something that's going to be important, because they are going to think you as weaker than if you shove, and they are going to think that, hey, I'm going to make that guy fold, even though they don't think that you are having a really nutty range there. And we have seen that you have also had like 9 deuce off in your min-raise range, so that was a stupid hand to pause on because nothing happened. Nothing happens here. Nothing happens. I don't know that if we have gone like 60 something hands and opponent has like folded his big blind to steal almost always, I think like right now I'm at least trying to stab at him somewhat, even though he has been active on the previous stages. Mm-hmm. And that was probably the blinds went up, so we can't see how this ended. But we started with the tournament that you won, so you probably won, and congrats for that. Mm-hmm. And do you have any questions at this end point?
Maybe a question about big blind defense in general. I mean, are there players or the position of players that it's better to defend my big blind against with a call? And are there positions of the players or player types where I shouldn't defend my big blind with a call?
I think that the most obvious spot to defend your big blind with a call would be when a small blind min raises against you. And I think on those situations you can call really, really widely. If you're having someone that plays like, that opens the 70, opens like 70% of the hands from small blind, you can pretty much, you don't have a bad enough hand that you couldn't play in position on big blind. So that's the most extreme example. But then there are like, even against position players, there are, even against button cutoff, you can defend by calling and shoving, and I think in general you pretty much also require to sometime add, when you are against really, really aggressive opponents, you can't just rely on 3-bets, and you'll start to notice that there are spots and hands that you can do a lot better than the 106 big blinds per 100 hands if you would just folded everything when antes are in play. But that's something that I didn't want to go there. So I did want you to start by increasing the aggression on the button, because it's harder to spoo on the button.
Okay.
If you start to defend really actively on the big blind, then there are a lot of opportunities to really spoo.
Okay.
But I think like, if I'm thinking about 6-max hypers that are from $30 to $60 games, I think many of the best regs there, their fold big blind to steal at something like 10 to 25 big blinds deep. Their fold big blind to steal is somewhere between 55 and 65%. So, and I think that I hate playing most against those kind of opponents that are folding their big blinds to steal really a short amount of time, and especially those that are also good post-flop players and are check raising and are donk betting with good ranges and are abusing even small edge, or are abusing even opportunities for getting a small edge there. But I think that's something that's in the future.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just an example on that how wide can you go on those blind defense situations, and that's pretty high if you are a good post-flop player.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
improving the post-flop, I think it's easiest to start by opening more on the button and concentrating more on the heads-up situations. But I don't know. Do you have any more questions at this point?
Maybe one general question is, if I open with a value hand like Ace King or something else that has value, and I get 2 callers, so there is a 3-way pot.
Yeah.
Does it ever make sense to make a c-bet if I miss against 2 people?
If both of the opponent check and you are in position, I think c-bet is going to get you the pot often enough. And with Ace King, if you are having Ace King suited and you are having, for example, a flush draw there, then it can be good. And if you are having Ace King and their flop is something like deuce 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 or 8-8-8 or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
then there might be some like there you are still having such a great equity even though you have missed the flop, so you don't have like anything more than the flop, but you are still having great equity. And also I think in 3-way pots it's sometimes even easier to bluff because people are thinking that you are more value heavy in those situations. But if you are having like 2 callers and the flop is something like Jack 9-8 two-tone, so there's a flush draw, then I don't think that there would ever be pretty much players that you are pretty much never getting the pot on the flop, even when the opponent check, and the opponent's calling range is going to hit the flop a lot harder, and that's why you are never going to get the pot on the flop.
Mm-hmm.
But I think like Ace King and even something like at the earlier stages when you are having a lot to play, it's even if it misses, it's still a valuable hand, but also it's a hand that will usually have some showdown value, and the next card may help you, so it doesn't make. So I think you are going good places with your train of thought, but I think there are some spots that you can and you should carry on betting it even in a 3-way pot.
Okay.
And I think that now it's time for me to go get the explosive pancake or whatever it's called. And it has been it has started to be hard to be in here because it smells so good. But thanks for everyone in the chat. It's always a pleasure to have active chat comments, and I think this is probably one of the more useful coaching sessions. There was so much stuff in it, and I think that there are so many things that Neo has to look even afterwards. to get a grasp on what we had today, and I thought that we are doing 2 breaks because we are having so many topics to discuss, and thanks also for Neo for being part of this public-private coaching. So this is a way for you to get the coaching at a discount, and the community gets also some quality material that's a bit different from the usual. And is there something from you to Neo to say still?
I just wanted to say thanks, and thanks for having me. Also, it was a bit on short notice. Thanks for the work you put in.
It's no problem, and I think that now you should also know that where your leagues are, so it's easier to go back working on your current leagues and get better on those.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also a good idea to say here that please subscribe to us on YouTube and register to our forums, be active in the forums, chat on the forums. In the Finnish side of the forums, the chat has been some kind of a campfire, that there are people on the chat pretty much all the time. But on the English side, the campfire hasn't been lit or something. But you can use the chat even outside the coaching sessions, and I'll hope that we'll see more action in there as well. And if you are going to sleep, well, have a good night. And if you are still carrying on playing poker, may this be the winningest night of them all. Bye!